Hello my friends and welcome back to another episode of Flutter Explained. Today we want to talk about setState method and how the state works in Flutter per se without any additional features, how we can lift the state up to the next level and which problems we maybe invoke with that. And now without further ado, let's get started. In the beginning, I want to explain you how the boilerplate is looking for today's episode. On the top we can see I created a My App, which is just a stateless widget, and here inside I override the theme data light with a color red that we can see up in the app bar. The checkbox screen is our main screen, and as you can see it is just a basic scaffold with an app bar with a background and a background color white for this stuff. The rest is just boilerplate. And inside we have a column which shows us the drinks tonight with a list of different drinks like water, wine and so on. And below we will see there is a ListView builder that contains our item builder that just creates a list tile at the moment that we can't see because the item count is 0, but you could see that we can already scroll in the view. Now here in the part we have a row, and inside of the row we have a checkbox already which value is set to false. That you can see on the right side that the checkbox is not selected. But when we change the value, so we click it, we will print the value, and as you can see it is true. So now it is time to create some state. We have to extract the false value into an own variable that we will call in this case water checkbox value. And you can see that the value is not be able to be in a build context because it's re-triggered all the time. So we would override this variable all the time. We have to bring it one level higher. But as you can see, the checkbox screen is getting a yellow line underneath and it says it is marked as immutable. That means we are not able to change parameters inside of a stateless widget. For that we have to set this variable final. And now this brings us to a problem. We are not able to change that state anymore. And that means we have to do something around it. But what would happen if we want to use it anyway in our checkbox? So the value is working because it can be single, but when on change, if we try to change the value and mutate the state now, you can see that there is a red line underneath the water checkbox value. And this happens because this can't be used because there is no setter on a final, and that means we can't change this variable actually. So our only option is to change the stateless widget to a stateful widget. And now you can see we split it in two parts. The top part, which is our widget, and the bottom part, which is actually our state and contains our state. Because we have now a state and the state is allowed to change and mutate its attributes, we can now delete the final part and are able to mutate the state of this stateful widget. Now we have on our on change, we are allowed to change the water checkbox value. And if we now print our water checkbox value, what will be the result? For that I bring up the emulator again. And if I'm clicking now on the checkbox, you will see the value is true. But interesting, even though that the value of the checkbox is now true, we can't see the selected part inside of the checkbox. Now we have down here two buttons. One is Flutter Hot Reload and the other one is Flutter Hot Restart. And if we press now Flutter Hot Reload, we keep the state, but we re-render the UI. And as you can see, the water checkbox gets now selected. This is actually the same behavior as we would do when we call setState. So let us do that. We call setState now, and this will tell Flutter to re-render the UI. And now instead of just calling it to true, we say unequal to water checkbox value. So we will change the value all the time. Alternatively, we could also use the value here. Okay, so now if we click on the checkbox, we can see we set the state and it's get changed. Perfect. So what happens if we click on Flutter Hot Restart? Now the state is getting rebuilt and the initial value is set again to false. And that's why we can't see the state anymore. But now that we know and we can change the water checkbox, let's have a look into the setState function. As you can see, the Flutter team already prevent us from a lot of errors that we can see here in the error summaries, error descriptions and error hints. All of them keeping us away from making mistakes with the setState. But interesting enough, the only thing that is called is element mark needs rebuild. And this mark needs rebuild tells the Flutter framework to re-render the UI in the next frame. So we mark our element as dirty, added it to the global list of widgets that needs rebuild in the global state. Now that we had this covered, how setState is working, we want to take another look into how to lift the state up and what does this actually mean. For this, we need a different widget for that. And I will create some boilerplate surrounding that. I will do that now very quickly, so I will be back in a second. Alright, so now we have created a drinks widget, which is a stateful widget that gets a drink name, so that we can separate between wine, water, wine, and so on. And then we have also a state, which is the drinks widget state. And here we have the water checkbox value, which is false. And the text down there is widget.drinkName, and we set the state to the water checkbox. And as you can see, when we click on one of the elements, we changing the state of that water checkbox. But what will happen if we want to access this drinks widget? The order is, we want to fill the order is later, right? So to make it easier for us, I will create a class called drink, and it contains a name and a selected Boolean variable to inform us if the drink is selected. In the next step, I transform our checkbox screen back to a stateful widget and add a list of different drinks like water, Cuba Libre, Pina Colada. And last, we add a Boolean variable which tells us it is selected or not. So now, instead of having these two drinks widgets, we will have this part. We spread our drinks, then we map them to a drinks widget and collect them to a list and spread them here inside of the children of the column. And with that, we have now the possibility, if I save, the different widgets on the right side. So we can select them, they are there. But we still don't have the state up here. So now in our list view, we want to access the drinks where the where method Mahtab explained the last time. I will show it in the info box above us. You have the drinks where length. So where the element is selected or the drink is selected, we want to have the length here as a counter. But as you see, if we select something, nothing actually happens. But this will come later. The next part is in our list tile, we want to do exactly the same. We want to access the drinks. So we change the water, say drinks.where, get the element selected, asking for to list, and then we want to access the index that we are currently in of the item builder and access the name parameter of that part. And with that, we would show now the text when we have a selected drink in the list. To make it more readable, I will change the drinks.where annotation into a variable so that we have that more easier to access and we don't have to have it multiple times here. But now when we have a class called drink and we get that here anyway, it makes not so much sense to give the drinks widget only the name. We can give it the drink, so the object itself. But we have to change for that the drinks widget slightly. So we jump inside of the drinks widget. And inside of here, we want to change a lot. The state full widget gets changed to a state less widget because we want to lift the state up. So we remove the constructors here, we remove the drink name, and we can also remove the value here because everything lives inside of the drink. Now we get a class drink, which is a drink. And what happens here is it is final because it's a stateless widget, right? So we create a constructor for it. And instead of getting the value here directly, we set drink.selected is the value. And also for the title, we give now drink.name. And the setState part has now to get removed because it is a stateless widget. So we can't set the state anymore inside of this widget. So we remove all of that part here where we say unchanged. And instead we give a function inside which is unchanged. and up here we create a function onChanged, and this onChanged function has to get in the constructor. Now with this onChanged method we can call that in the parent and give a callback to the parent that the onChanged method has been triggered. So we go up here where we create our drinks widget and add the onChanged method here inside. And inside of this onChanged method, we want now to change the drink.selected to the value that we get from onChanged. So we have to add the onChanged as a parameter and change the drink.selected. And with that, we have now managed it to change the checkbox and keep the state in the parent. So the parent knows now about the selected drink. But of course we have to set the state again. And now, because we set the state in the parent and the child is getting rebuilt, we see the state of the checkbox is working perfectly fine and the order is working also perfectly fine already. So with that, we have lifted the state up to the parent and the child don't know anymore about the state. But now let's focus on the problems with the setState function. Assume that all of these blue boxes are different widgets and the green box contains now currently our state, and this widget on the right side wants to get the state now from the left side because they want to share it under some circumstances. So for example, the checkbox information. So now we would need to lift the state up to that one and to here so that we can then from the parent, we could now pass the state down to the other widget. And as you see now, we have effective 5 widgets effectively changed to get the information where it belongs. And this is a lot of boilerplate and a lot of hassle and leads to a lot of problems. So what would happen if we now remove on the left side the box with the state? Now we would have to remove the state in all the different parts too. And this leads to a lot of hassle. And as you see, even with the box changes, it is already a lot of work. So assume to have that same thing into your code base.
All right, with that, we have now the possibility to talk about advantages and disadvantages of setState. setState is very coherent and we know exactly what happens. We don't have a code generation that creates us more code that we actually see or have written ourselves. It is synchronous, so we know exactly at which point of time the setState happens and everyone else can also easily understand it, and it is very well documented in the Flutter framework. With that, we are able to make very easy readable code that is very easy to understand. And it's perfectly fine to work with this setState management tool. But the disadvantage is that if we have a very big widget tree with multiple widgets around that have to share the same state, and we have to change something from one part of the widget tree to the other part of the widget tree, a lot of different code parts have to be changed, and this could lead to problems. Alright guys, so if you liked this video, please give that video a like and please share that video with everyone who could be interested in setState method or is new to Flutter. And then it would be great if you haven't subscribed yet to press the big subscribe button in the center of me, I think. And on top of me, you find the 2 videos that you are most likely be interested in. Thank you so much for joining us today and enjoy the rest of your week. See ya.